Gonna do something a little different for this channel I haven't done before. Let's just go right into Brandon Shanahan's presser about Kyle Dubas not being renewed as GM for the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Timeline on the Kyle Dubas contract. I suppose you could go back to last offseason. I approached Kyle in his office at the Ford Performance Center and explained to him that he would be not receiving a contract offer prior to his final year of his contract. At the end of the year, and after being judged for the full 5 years of his contract, that we would be extending him and moving forward.
To me, this makes perfect sense. Dubas has not won anything, and this team was struggling to get past the first round. It does make sense for Shanahan to do a wait-and-see approach and see if the team actually improves.
Going throughout the year, the way that the team was managed, I had no issue with that. As a matter of fact, I thought that, again, Kyle did an excellent job. I thought that he made some very good moves, and I thought he had prepared the team to the best of his ability, as any GM can do after the trade deadline. There's not as much for a GM to do.
It seems like overall, Shanahan was happy with what he was doing. He was happy with how he was making these acquisitions, improving the team for the deadline. Kyle Dubas checked off all the boxes for Shanahan, and he was excited about how he was handling this team. And I will again say, like I said in my original video, I thought he made some good acquisitions at the trade deadline to make the Maple Leafs a far better team to go deeper in the postseason, and they did get past the first round. So I could see why Shanahan would be happy about Dubas making these moves and improving the team to get to that next level.
In the middle of March, I approached Kyle in his office at Ford Performance Center and told him that I had seen enough in my mind that I had wanted him to be our general manager going forward.
This is where it gets interesting. Brandon Shanahan wanted to go forward with Dubas being the general manager. I will fully admit, I'm kind of surprised he made that decision in March instead of seeing how things would shake out in the postseason. But to be fair, he made some good deals, and I thought this season was probably his best season as a general manager. I made videos complimenting on Dubas's moves. I think he's come a long way since his first season as general manager, but again, a little bit surprising he would want to re-up him before the postseason.
He came back to me about a week later and said yes, that he was comfortable moving forward, and he gave me the name of his agent, or he said his agent would reach out to me.
Some people took this segment as a bad thing, but let's be very frank. You're better off letting your agents handle your contracts. When you get personally invested, it can get a little bit tenuous between you and the organization. I do think that's a good move. Let the agents deal with the contract talk so you can just focus on doing your job. So according to this timeline, Shanahan reached out to the agent reaches out to Dubas, obviously, and yeah, he said he would love to be back and be the Toronto Maple Leaf general manager. It's just very weird what happens next in this timeline, and I have to question, did Dubas make the right move here?
Expressed to him that it was not my intention to talk to the media until I had something settled with him. I expressed that I thought it was maybe a good idea if he didn't either, but Kyle said he really wanted to talk to the media, and I respected that.
This is where it starts to fall apart. Now, it makes sense for Shanahan not to want to take part in media until he has a contract, because let's be very fair here. He'll be there with Dubas, and the questions will be asked, well, is Dubas going to be retained, and will he be back as a Toronto Maple Leaf general manager? And I don't disagree with Dubas doing media because he wants to be there with his coaches and players and have kind of a unified stance. But when you watch that press conference by Dubas, him saying he might not be back as the Toronto Maple Leaf GM, it takes a toll on him and his family. That was the beginning of the end.
Part of our conversation in my office was that this was hard on his family. In fairness, we talked about that, how, quite frankly, it's hard on all our families. Watching Kyle's press, I think at that point, there was a shift in my thinking at that moment, a dramatical shift in my thinking as I drove home that night, that, as Kyle expressed, he might not want to be our GM. And I have to take that very seriously.
I don't know how much flack I'll get for saying this, but I'm going to be very honest with how I feel. Yes, it's a stressful job. Yes, you're dealing with a lot. But you took that job understanding the pressures that it would hold. It wasn't going to be a cakewalk. Any hockey team, especially in the Toronto market, it's going to be crazy when it comes to media coverage and the fan base. And I don't mean that in a bad way. They love their Leafs, but they also get very frustrated at their Leafs. I'm not excusing any fans that cross a line and get a little bit too personal. That needs to stop. But that is the pressure cooker you enter into. And with jobs in life, you understand the pros and cons, and that is one of the cons of this type of job.
Possibility for me at that point that I would be needing to look somewhere else. And it's, as part of my job, that is what I began to do while still hoping that Kyle and I could come to some sort of a resolution. What I would say then was in the next few days, I didn't get any more clarity.
So it seems as soon as Dubas says this publicly, Shanahan's gears are turning in his head. Well, damn, this guy might not take this contract. This guy might be difficult. And now I got to look and see if somebody can fill that GM role. And I can't really blame him. When you publicly state you don't know if you'll be back as the GM when you have been offered a contract, and you publicly state it's very difficult on your family, what do you expect Shanahan to do? Just sit on his hands and not look into other candidates?
I got a call in the afternoon from his agent, and basically a new financial package was presented to me by the agent. And just before dinner time, I got an email from Kyle saying that he did want to be the general manager of the Maple Leafs.
This is not the best way to try to get more money out of an organization. Just be honest and open. Try to negotiate in that fact with the financials. If they do not meet your requirements and you want to move on to greener pastures, that's fine. I think Dubas botched this negotiation process. From my standpoint, he made those comments publicly to have some type of leverage so they'd give him a bit more money. And I have to ask this to Maple Leafs fan. Would you want to give Dubas more money? The guy has not won anything. Is he a good GM? Yeah, I mean, C+, B- in my books. He hasn't won anything, hasn't won a cup. How much more of a pay raise did this guy want? Just seems like he counted his chickens before they hatched.
I had gotten to a different place about how I felt about the future of the Toronto Maple Leafs and what was best. Drove to Kyle's office at Ford Performance Center and informed him that we were not going to be renewing his contract.
I do not blame Brendan Shanahan any way, shape, or form. Is Dubas to blame for all of this issues that the Maple Leafs have faced over the years? No. He's a young GM, and I think he learned on the job. And I thought this year was his best year as a general manager. Are there certain contracts you probably want to redo on? Absolutely. But he was a very young GM trying to find his way. A knock I saw in the first video I did, and I'm going to talk directly to this commenter. He mentioned that Dubas had to sign these contracts and things of that ilk. Let's be very clear. Nylander did have leverage over the Leafs. He was holding out and he wouldn't come back unless he got the contract he wanted. Marner was a good young player that they wanted to pay early, and same with Matthews. When I'm looking at the Leafs, and this is where it falls a bit short for me when it comes to Dubas contracts, John Tavares, even at the time, and yes, he had some offers that might have been north of that $11 million. Some analysts said, well, this is going to age poorly and it might affect the long-term health of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and that just turned out to be the case. And I don't have a YouTube channel old enough to verify my thoughts. I loved Tavares on the Islanders. I thought he was a great captain and a great player there for a very long time. But let's be very clear. Everyone knew that contract was going to age poorly. He had a lot of miles on his legs. He carried that franchise single-handedly. And as for other signings, I mean, he traded Sandin and other pieces that were quality, and I don't think got the greatest package yet. Now, usually it takes 4 to 5 years to see the true return on trade, so I will give people that. I will give it a grace period, but right now it does not look great. And then the acquisition of Matt Murray, that was head-scratching. That guy cannot stay healthy. That is an albatross of a contract that is going to be very, very difficult to move. Did Dubas make some good moves? Absolutely. I don't think the Matthews and Marner's contract are fantastic, but they're not terrible either. They're young players that they want to lock up. The one thing I would not, it just seems like when it came to negotiations, Dubas wasn't great and players got very favorable contracts, which salute to them, but puts the organization in a very difficult spot. And I'll speak very clearly here. It's a tough job. It is a very, very tough job to be a GM of any hockey team, especially a Canadian one, especially in the Toronto market. He was very young, 32 when he became a general manager. I think he could have benefited by being an assistant general manager for a little bit and kind of learning how to work deals. It would have probably prepared him more for this stress and the vitriol he would get from certain parts of the fan base. But the one thing I gotta commend is once he realized his certain way of building teams wasn't really working out, he was willing to try other avenues. Like bringing in Jake McCabe and Ryan O'Reilly and Luke Shen signified to me he was growing and becoming a better general manager. I didn't think Dubas should have been fired. I think he just needed a bit more time, but I can understand why some people in the fan base would just want to move on because it's been a 5-year experiment. Was all 5 years a failure? No. As I stated in the other video, he went to the playoffs in every single season he was the GM. But unfortunately, they did not achieve the ultimate goal. And now, due to the way this roster was constructed, the Maple Leafs have a very difficult path ahead to figure out how they're going to go into next season. Do they just do scorched earth and go with more prospects? I mean, Matthew Knives gives you a little bit of hope. That's going to be a cheaper contract. Do you kind of go that route and see, hey, maybe with a third and fourth very cheap line, we can possibly retain all our stars? People want to trade Auston Matthews, Mitch Marner. The only one that would get traded would be Nylander, but Nylander did very good, in my opinion, in that last series. I wouldn't want to see him go. I think there's aspects of his game that make him a great player. But at the end of the day, due to the way they have formed this team, they rely on their offense. They live or die by it. And they have a bunch of quality second to third pairing defensemen. And Riley's a number 2 masquerading as a 1. I'll just say this. If they had one of those bigger contracts allocated to defense, maybe the Maple Leafs just get a little bit further in the postseason. Just some food for thought. I'm Captain Paul. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'd like to know your take on this situation. Do you think Dubas got a little bit too greedy? I'll see you in the next one.